One of the easiest ways to think badly is to trust a thought too quickly. Not because the thought is stupid, not because your mind is broken, but because some thoughts arrive with so much speed and emotion that they feel like judgment. You get feedback at work. Before you really hear it, your mind says, "They do not understand how much I have done." Someone you love says, "I do not feel heard." Before you get curious, your mind says, "So now I am the problem?" Your family questions your choice. Before you examine it, your mind says, "Maybe they are right. Maybe I should be more realistic." You hear someone speak with confidence online. Before you have tested the idea, it already starts sounding like your own. In each moment, it feels like you are thinking, but sometimes something in you has reacted so quickly that the reaction has already become a conclusion. And this is where powerful thinking begins. Not with more information, not with better arguments, not with sounding smarter. It begins with the ability to notice the moment before a thought becomes something you obey. Because the first thought is not always the clearest thought. Sometimes it is only the fastest part of you trying to feel safe. So the question is not only, what do I think? The real question is, what is shaping this thought before I trust it? Most people treat their thoughts as if they are already conclusions. A thought appears inside the mind, so it feels personal. And because it feels personal, it feels trustworthy. But the mind produces many kinds of thoughts. Some thoughts are judgments, but many are not. They are reactions, defenses, fears looking for safety, desires looking for permission, old beliefs trying to survive, and voices you inherited so early that they now sound like your own. This matters because a thought can be sincere and still not be clear. You may sincerely think, "I should not try," but that thought may come from fear. You may sincerely think, "I am fine," but that thought may come from avoidance. You may sincerely think, "They are completely wrong," but that thought may come from shame. Powerful thinking is not the ability to have no fear, no bias, no emotion, and no defense. That would not be human. Powerful thinking is the ability to notice what kind of thought you are having before you let it guide your life. So the first question is not always, is this thought true? Sometimes the better first question is, what kind of thought is this? Is it judgment, or is it a reaction pretending to be judgment? The fastest thought often comes from the part of you that feels most threatened, not the wisest part, not the most mature part, the most threatened part. This is why feedback can feel like attack. A manager says, "Can we talk about this draft?" But your mind does not only hear a draft being discussed, it hears competence being questioned. It hears, "Maybe I am not good at this." So the thought arrives quickly. They are unfair. They do not appreciate me. This place is impossible. Maybe some of that is true, but the first thought did not begin as careful judgment. It began as protection. The same thing happens in relationships. Someone says, "I felt hurt by what you said." Before you listen, something in you tightens. The first thought becomes, "They are blaming me. I can never do anything right. They are too sensitive." Again, the thought may contain a piece of reality, but it may also be protecting an identity, being good, being caring, being misunderstood, or being the one who has already tried enough. This is why thinking is difficult under emotional pressure. You are not only evaluating information, you are protecting a self-image. A possible truth arrives, and some part of you asks, what would this mean about me? Would it mean I failed? Would it mean I was wrong? Would it mean I have to change? When a thought threatens your identity, your mind may treat it less like information and more like danger. So it reacts quickly. It builds an argument quickly. It rejects the possibility before you have really looked at it. The first thought often protects what feels threatened before it reveals what is true. That does not mean the first thought is always wrong. It means the first thought deserves to be examined, especially when it arrives with urgency, especially when it makes you feel immediately right. A stronger mind does not shame the threatened part. It notices it. It asks, what part of me feels threatened by this? And what would I see if I did not defend that part so quickly? One of the most uncomfortable truths about thinking is this: intelligence does not protect you from self-deception. Sometimes it makes self-deception more convincing. If you are articulate, you can explain your avoidance beautifully. If you are analytical, you can build a strong case for staying where you are. If you understand psychology, you can use the right language to avoid the harder truth. If you are good with ideas, you can create a version of reality that sounds mature, reasonable, and responsible, even when it is protecting fear. You might say, I'm just being realistic. But underneath that realism is the fear of failing. You might say, I am waiting for the right time. But underneath that patience is the fear of being seen trying. You might say, this relationship is complicated. But underneath the complexity is a simple fact you do not want to admit. Psychologists call one part of this motivated reasoning. It means your reasoning is still working. You are still using logic. You are still building arguments. But the reasoning has already been pulled toward a conclusion you want to protect. The mind is not only asking, what is true? Sometimes it is asking, how can I make the answer I want feel reasonable? That is why a person can be intelligent and still think badly, not because they cannot reason, but because their reasoning has been hired by fear, desire, pride, shame, or identity. Another useful idea is cognitive dissonance. This is the discomfort that appears when your beliefs, actions, values, and self-image do not fit together. You believe you respect yourself, but you keep accepting treatment that makes you feel small. You believe you want freedom, but your choices keep making your life narrower. You believe you are honest with yourself, but there is one subject you keep explaining away. That contradiction hurts, so the mind tries to reduce the discomfort. Sometimes it does that by changing behavior, but sometimes it does it by changing the story. You tell yourself it is not that bad. You tell yourself this is just adulthood. You tell yourself you are being patient, practical, loyal, mature, or strong. And sometimes those words are true. But sometimes they are a shelter built to keep the contradiction standing. This is why powerful thinking requires more than intelligence. It requires the courage to ask, am I trying to understand this? Or am I trying to protect a conclusion? The mind can build very intelligent arguments for a conclusion it is afraid to lose. A stronger thinker learns to notice when intelligence is being used as a defense. Not every thought inside you began with you. Some thoughts were planted early, repeated often, rewarded consistently, and eventually they stopped sounding like someone else's voice. They started sounding like common sense. A parent says, "Be realistic." Years later, your own desire appears, and you answer it with that same sentence. A teacher once called you careless. Years later, every mistake feels like evidence that you cannot trust yourself. A workplace rewards exhaustion. Slowly, you begin to call burnout commitment. A social circle treats one lifestyle as success. Slowly, you begin wanting things before you know whether you value them. Borrowed thoughts do not always feel foreign. Often, they feel familiar, and because they feel familiar, they feel true. But familiarity is not ownership. A belief can live inside you for years and still not be fully yours. This does not mean every inherited thought is false. Your family may have taught you something wise. Your culture may have given you values worth keeping. A mentor may have shown you a standard that made you better. The goal is not to reject everything that came from outside you. The goal is to stop confusing inheritance with judgment. A powerful thinker asks, "Who taught me to think this way before I called it my own? Where did this sentence come from? Whose fear does it carry? Whose life did it fit? Does it still fit mine?" Borrowed thoughts can quietly decide the size of your life. They can tell you what is possible, what is respectable, what is foolish, what is selfish, what is safe, what kind of person you are allowed to become. And the more often you repeat them, the more they start to feel like identity. I am just not that kind of person. I need to be practical. People like me should not expect too much. This is what success looks like. This is what a good child does. Some of those thoughts may contain wisdom. Some may contain fear. Some may contain love. Some may contain control. Some may belong to a world that no longer exists. A stronger mind asks, does this thought help me see reality more clearly, or does it keep me loyal to a life I never consciously chose? Sometimes the problem is not that you cannot find an answer. Sometimes the problem is that you are trying to answer the question before it has become honest. Adult life often gives you questions that do not open immediately. Should I stay in this job or admit that it is changing me? Should I leave this relationship, or am I only afraid of what repair would require? Should I listen to my family, or am I letting guilt make the choice for me? Should I start over, or am I still trying to make the old life work? Should I choose stability, even if a part of me is asking for freedom? These questions are heavy because they are not only about action, they are about identity, loss, guilt, desire, fear, money, belonging, and the future. So the mind wants relief. It wants something clean. Stay or leave. Yes or no. Try or stop. A fast answer can feel powerful because it ends the discomfort of not knowing. But ending discomfort is not the same as understanding. Psychologists call this the need for cognitive closure. It is the desire for a definite answer when uncertainty feels too uncomfortable. And everyone has this need sometimes. Not knowing is tiring. Ambiguity can feel unsafe. A complex question can make you feel weak because you cannot control it quickly. But sometimes the answer you want is not clarity. Sometimes it is anesthesia. It helps you stop feeling the question before you have really understood what the question is asking from you. A powerful thinker does not worship uncertainty. They do not stay confused forever. They do not avoid action by calling it complexity, but they can stay with a question long enough to stop using an answer as escape. So before asking, "What is the answer?" ask, "What question am I trying to escape by demanding an answer too quickly?" At this point, powerful thinking may sound complicated, but the practice is often very small. It happens in the small moment before you reply, before you defend yourself, before you agree too quickly, before you reject what makes you uncomfortable, before you turn a feeling into a conclusion. This is where metacognition matters. Metacognition means the ability to observe and regulate your own thinking process. In plain language, it means you are not only asking, "What do I think?" you are also asking, "How did this thought form? What is shaping it? What is it doing in me? What is it trying to protect?" Metacognition is not overthinking. Overthinking often circles the same fear again and again. Metacognition steps back from the circle and asks, what is driving it? Overthinking says, what if this goes wrong? Metacognition asks, why does this possibility feel so dangerous to me? Overthinking says, what should I do? Metacognition asks, what am I trying not to feel while I search for an answer? This kind of thinking is not cold. It does not remove emotion. It listens to emotion without letting emotion become the only author of the conclusion. Emotion is information, but it should not be the only judge. Fear may have something to tell you. Shame may have something to reveal. Anger may point toward a boundary. Desire may point toward a neglected part of your life. But none of these should automatically make the whole decision. Thinking becomes stronger when you can let each part speak without handing the whole decision to the loudest part. So when a thought arrives with force, you do not have to obey it immediately. You can ask, what is this thought trying to protect? Is it protecting my pride, my safety, my identity, my comfort, or my fear of being wrong? That question does not solve everything, but it changes your relationship to your own mind. You stop being inside every thought as if it is reality. You begin to see the thought as something happening in you. And once you can see it, you have a little more freedom in how you respond. A weaker way of thinking tries to make life simple too quickly. This person is good or bad. This choice is right or wrong. This job is success or failure. This relationship is safe or wasted. This path is realistic or foolish. This feeling means stay. This feeling means leave. But adult life often does not arrive in clean categories. You can love your family and still need more autonomy. You can want stability and still feel your life becoming smaller. You can love someone and still know the relationship cannot hold you well. You can need money and still refuse to let money become the only language of your worth. You can be grateful and still feel controlled. You can be loyal and still need to tell the truth. This is where thinking becomes judgment, not because you have a perfect answer, but because you can hold competing truths without forcing one to erase the other. Some thinkers and philosophers have called this practical wisdom, not abstract intelligence, not cleverness, not being able to win a debate, but the ability to respond well inside a real situation where values collide. Because life does not always ask, what is the correct idea? Often it asks, What response fits the reality in front of me? A stronger mind does not need every question to become simple before it can respond. It can say, "This is complicated, and I still need to choose. I understand where this came from, and I still need a boundary. I am afraid, and I still need to look. I am not certain, and I still need to act carefully. I have inherited this belief, and I still need to decide whether I want to keep living by it." Complexity is not an excuse to avoid action, and simplicity is not always proof of clarity. Sometimes the simplest story is only the story that hurts the least. So ask, what am I making too simple because complexity feels too heavy? What truth am I erasing so I can feel decisive? What part of this situation deserves more attention before I respond? That is powerful thinking. Not thinking that removes difficulty, thinking that can stay honest inside difficulty. The goal is not to distrust your mind. That would only create another prison. The goal is to know your mind well enough not to obey every part of it too quickly. Your first thought may be useful. It may carry information. It may reveal pain. It may point to something you need to protect. But it is not always the whole truth. A thought can be a reaction, a defense, a borrowed voice, or an intelligent argument protecting something you are afraid to lose. Judgment begins when you can tell the difference. So before you trust the first thought, pause long enough to ask, what is shaping this thought? What does it want me to believe? What is it protecting? What would I see if I did not need this answer to be true? A powerful thinker is not someone who never feels threatened, not someone who has no bias, not someone who never reacts, not someone who turns life into pure logic. A powerful thinker is someone who can notice the reaction before becoming it, someone who can hear the borrowed voice before obeying it, someone who can feel the need for a fast answer without letting it close the question too soon, someone who can use intelligence to examine life, not only to defend the life they already know. The first thought is not always the clearest thought. Sometimes it is only the fastest part of you trying to keep you safe. So do not rush to hate it. Do not rush to obey it. Listen to it, examine it, and then ask what a clearer part of you can see. Because powerful thinking is not about having a perfect mind. It is about building a more honest relationship with the mind you already have.